So hello and welcome to another episode of TopTenz. I'm your host Carl Smallwood, and today we're talking about 10 things you never knew were named for their inventors. Original article by Ian Fortey. Being an inventor is all well and good, but if no one knows what you invented, then it won't do you much good, right? You have to get the word out about your invention. Part of that involves coming up with a good name for your invention as well, something catchy that will stick in people's minds. If you're thinking of naming it after yourself to capitalise on your invention's popularity and go down in history, like Henry Ford, you may want to think again. Plenty of inventors name things after themselves and were promptly forgotten, even if their invention continues to live on. For example, number 10, Junker planes were named for HUGO Junkers. Have you ever heard of an airplane called a junker? Right away, whether or not you've heard of it, you're probably thinking it's a piece of crap. It's called a junker. That means junk, right? Well, unfortunately for one HUGO Junkers, that's not true. The actual name of these planes are Junkers after the inventor, but many people mistake that for the plural of Junker. The Junkers F-13 was the first all-metal aircraft that could carry passengers, and it was made all the way back in 1913. HUGO Junkers made many innovations in civil aviation. It's one of the most important founders in the aviation world. He contributed both to military and civil aviation, and the work he did is still part of the aviation world today. It's just that few people outside the industry know his story, and when they hear his name, they often mistake it for a criticism. Number 9, Shrapnel is named for Henry That's not a name. If I knew a guy called Henry Shrapnel, I'd be like, no, I don't. Most everyone's probably heard of shrapnel before. It refers to fragments of something that has exploded, usually a bomb, but could even be from a gunshot or some other explosion that sent pieces of dangerous debris flying. Those pieces are shrapnel. Or if you're British, you've got a lot like change. It's like something like, older northern people say, oh, I'm giving my shrapnel, mate. I'm getting rid of it all, like, cha-ching. It's very funny.
Okay.
Because shrapnel can be formed from almost anything, most of us wouldn't consider it an invention. It's not like someone went out there and made up all those little pieces themselves. However, someone had to come up with the concept, and that's where Henry Shrapnel comes in. Shrapnel was born in 1761 and was a soldier. He specialised in artillery and, not to put a finer point on it, horrible ways to hurt people. He invented a kind of artillery shell that would explode before impact and spread smaller projectiles over an area. Modern anti-personnel bombs are made using this exact concept. Devices filled with things like ball bearings or nails that maim and kill in a much larger area than a single explosion by itself ordinarily would. Nachos were named for IGNACIO, NACHO, ANAYA. About 20% of restaurants in the United States have nachos on their menu, and they've been a staple since they debuted all the way back in 1943. A man named Ignacio Anaya was working at a restaurant called Club Victoria when some customers came in to order food. It may have been an odd time of day, but for whatever reason the ingredients for the normal menu items were not on hand. Anaya, who was the kitchen manager, made up something on a whim. Tortillas cut into chips, then fried, topped with jalapenos and grated cheese. He put them under a broiler to melt the cheese and called it Nachos Especial, or Nacho Special. Why? Because Nacho was his nickname, a shortened version of his real name, Ignacio. The customers loved it and soon it spread to other restaurants, and within a few years recipes were being offered in cookbooks. Nachos became nachos, and it was soon forgotten that the word referred to a man and not the chips. Pap smear was named after a man. A pap test, or pap smear, is a test that involves scraping the cells from a woman's cervix to look for abnormalities which can help diagnose cervical cancer. It's a very important test that is recommended for all women in their 20s at least once every 3 years. The test, if you've never experienced it, obviously, is as comfortable as it sounds. Not necessarily painful, though it can be, but not pleasant either way. What most people don't think about though is the name. What the heck is a pap and why is it being smeared? The full name is a Papinacoloa test. That name comes from George Papinacoloa, a man who invented the test. Papinacoloa was born in Greece, if it wasn't already clear from the name Papinacoloa, in 1883 and went through more jobs than it seems entirely normal for a historically famous doctor. He was a doctor, of course, but also a rug salesman, a violinist, a soldier, a zoologist, and many others. In America, his medical work was with guinea pigs, where he discovered he could use a smear of their vaginal secretions, just let that image sit in people's head for a moment, to determine their reproductive cycles. He soon started similar work on humans and discovered that he could detect abnormalities that were precursors to cancer, and the rest is history. Just popping down for a Papinacoloa test. That reminds me of that thing of like, let me know in the comments if it's true, but there's no part of the vagina that's not named after a man. And it's like, I think like a lady discovered the G-spot, and she was called like Whipple or something, and they wanted to call it Whipple's Tickle. I don't know, let me know in the comments if that's true, because that's just a really funny thing. Maybe editor fact check that one. I just always remember hearing that story and it was very funny to me. Number 6, popsicles are technically named after Frank Epperson. Okay, where's this one going? In the dog days of summer, few things more refreshing than a frosty, sweet popsicle. Some people just call them ice pops, or over here in the UK, ice lollies. Because of that, the name sounds pretty generic. Sickle is like icicle, we all get that. Pop is because it's a pop, right? What the hell is a pop? According to history, popsicles were invented by an 11-year-old named Frank Epperson. Right away, you may question how they're named after him, but hold up. It'll make sense in a moment. According to legend, Frank had been stirring a drink with a stick but forgot it on the porch on a frosty night and it froze. When he found it later, it was a frozen treat with its own handle and thus history was made. But he was 11, so it didn't go anywhere. By the time he patented the idea as an adult, no one else had thought of it, so he named them Epsicles. No! Epsicles? I would... Ice lolly sounds... No, I don't want an Epsicle. The kids agreed no one wanted to eat an Epsicle because of course they didn't want to eat an Epsicle. They called them popsicles because they were Pop's sickles, as in, hey Pop, make me one of your sickles. And even though it wasn't his given name, their Pop took their advice and changed it thusly. Number 5, the saxophone was named after ADOLPHE sax. Most of the instruments used in modern music date back a pretty long time. Guitar, the word at least, can be traced back all the way to the Greeks, and it was even used to describe a stringed instrument back then. The word drum, on the other hand, goes back as far as the 15th century and may come from Middle Dutch when it seems to have onomatopoeic origins. And then there's the saxophone. The saxophone only dates back to 1846, where it was patented by Adolphe Sax. The son of an instrument maker, Sax had been surrounded by instruments much of his life, so inventing a new one seemed natural. His creation was meant to be an improvement on the bass clarinet. Despite the popularity of namesake instrument and even the resurrection of its company, Sax made very little money in his life. And this is a lot to do with the fact he was sabotaged a lot by fellow music makers who didn't like his instrument, often calling it the devil's instrument. And these financial woes resulted in his own friends having to petition his government for financial aid the year that he died. Number 4, James Salisbury gave us the Salisbury steak. And I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, we don't have Salisbury steak here in the UK, so I'm just going to go with Salisbury, that's what I've heard on TV, so that's what I'm going to stick with. Walk down any frozen food aisle in any grocery store in America and you will doubtlessly find at least half a dozen kinds of Salisbury steak, usually in TV dinners. Once upon a time, this food was so popular you could get it in cans and was even part of a health food craze in the 1800s. Salisbury steak was invented by Dr. James Salisbury, part of his plan to treat soldiers during the Civil War. Salisbury was an early proponent of germ theory and also diet linked to health. Not novel ideas today, but they were back then. During the Civil War, stomach ailments were not just annoying, they were potentially deadly. Salisbury proposed beefsteak and coffee as a cure-all, and the Salisbury steak was born. Part of the genius of the steak is that it was grilled. Salisbury was promoting protein as having health benefits, and his beef patty, because it was grilled instead of boiled like most... boiled meat. Like most of the meat. I'm British and I don't like the sound of that. As a result of being grilled instead of boiled, it kept all of its B vitamins and really was healthier than other dishes at the time. The food stuff got a tremendous boost during World War I when no one wanted to eat the German-sounding Hamburg steak and everything was renamed for Salisbury, making Salisbury steak part of the language and culture ever since. Even to this day, soldiers eat Salisbury steak or something like that when deployed. RITALIN was named after the inventor's wife. Of all the products you'd expect to be named for a person, prescription medication popularly used to treat ADHD probably isn't one of them. Most modern drugs tend to have gibberish sounding names. In fact, there's a whole process behind giving drugs a brand name that involves ensuring it doesn't sound like another drug on the market, it can't make the drug sound better or more effective than other drugs, and so on. Ritalin would probably still pass those rules today, but it didn't need to when it was developed back in the 1940s. The proper name for it was, it's going to be a fun one, methylphenidate. I'm going to go with that. But that's admittedly a bit of a mouthful, so Ritalin became the brand name that was chosen by Leandro Panzinon, the man who both created and self-tested it. Panzinon didn't just try the drug himself, he gave it to his wife, Marguerite. She played tennis and found the drug helped her improve her game. The results were remarkably quick, something Ritalin is known for, and it's proved to Panzinon that he had come up with something worthwhile. In honour of his wife helping test it, he named it after her, using her nickname, Rita. BENGUE was invented by Jules BENGUE. I'm kind of disappointed he's not like a guy just called BENGUE. BENGUE is a pain-relieving cream meant to treat muscle and joint pain. You rub some in, it warms you up, and you feel the pain relief. It's been around since the 1800s as well. The unusual name and age are probably the reason many people aren't aware it was named after the man who created it. more or less. And I wonder as well, Americans, like watching out, do you have Tiger Balm? We don't have BENGUE, we have Tiger Balm, which is the same thing. It's like you rub it into your joints and it's like, you know, good for pain relief and stuff. And I was always like the name Tiger Balm. The original BENGUE formula was created by one Dr. Jules BENGUE, a French physician. It was marketed in France for years before a doctor took the formulation to the United States. From 1898 until 1933, it was sold as Baume Angélique BENGUE, or Angélique BENGUE, or other similar names. In 1933, the words BENGUE were added underneath, seemingly to aid Americans with the French pronunciation of the doctor's name. Eventually, BENGUE became the only name the product was really known by, with a small description of it as an analgesic balm. And finally, the name was changed to the unhyphenated BENGUE that is on labels today. Could you tell I was pronouncing it with a hyphen? Because I was. Number 1. M&M's are named for their creator and investor. If this isn't Eminem, the rapper, I'm going to be very disappointed. M&M's are one of the most popular candies in the world, so the story goes, were inspired by candies eaten by soldiers during the Spanish Civil War. Nowadays, the Mars company makes about 400 of the little chocolates every single day. They come in many varieties, including plain, peanut, almond, crispy, coconut, mint, dark chocolate, white chocolate, and more. Which is your favourite, let us know at home. Each one is stamped with the instantly recognisable M on the candy shell. So what do those M's mean? Well, it turns out each M is the initial of a different person. One is Forrest Mars, son of Frank Mars, who founded the Mars Candy Company, and the other is Bruce Murray, son of the original founder of Hershey, who invested in Mars. They teamed up to make M&M's, and the candy is named, or at least partially, in their honour. So thank you for tuning into this episode of TopTenz. Once again, I'm your host, Carl Smallwood, and this article was written by Ian Fortey. Links to all of our socials can be found, no doubt, below, as well as one to the original article. Thank you once again to TopTenz for allowing me to step in as the interim host, and you can find more of my work at FactFiend, linked below. I hope anyway. I'm saying this, just if it's not, just Google FactFiend, you'll find me. And I hope everyone out there has enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and have the day you deserve. Cheers, everybody.